Well, it's spring, apparently.
So this is our old planter, as you can see. It's seen better days and it's had its last winter. So I'm going to build this to replace it. And we're going to be using some recycled wood that we have lying around the workshop. Here's the wood piled up and ready to be cut. As you see, I've made a few cuts already. I'm using the miter saw for all the cross cuts. I set up a stop block on the miter saw for consistency. And I'm cutting out any unusable pieces as I go. Incidentally, there are free plans available for this project from the link in the description below. Then it's over to the table saw for the rip cuts. Now all the pieces are cut to size, I'll move on to assembly. Starting with the legs, I'm joining a 40mm piece to a 25mm piece. The wood I'm using is 15mm thick, so we end up with a 40x40 L-shaped leg. Here's one I made earlier in true Blue Peter fashion. The legs are put together with a squeeze of waterproof glue and then pinned in place. Once the legs are done, I can make the 3 square supporting frames, which will be at the bottom, middle and top of the legs. The frames are made up of 2 370mm pieces and 2 shorter 340mm pieces, which, as the wood is 15mm thick, as I said, will give us a square once fixed together. I'm using some waterproof glue and pinning the joints with brad nails, holding a small square in the corner to keep everything true. Then we'll repeat that for the other 2 frames. Then I fix each leg into a corner, gluing and pinning as before. Next we need to add the middle and top frames. I'm using a small piece of 6mm ply to make sure that the middle frame is fixed at a consistent level all the way around. Then, after measuring the required gap, I have a 140mm wide scrap of wood to use for the top rail, which will make sure that the legs are 5mm below the top of the frame. This is so that the plastic trough I'm using will fit inside and be held loosely in place. It also means that once the capping pieces are fitted shortly, the trough will be level with the wood. You may need to adjust this depending on how deep the rim of your trough is. Starting with the 37mm slats, I'm fixing these to one side of the planter. The important thing is to make sure the tops are aligned with the frame. Again, gluing and pinning them into place. Then I'll fix these onto the other side. And once it's done, I'll fix the 40mm slats onto the 2 remaining sides. Then we move on to the capping pieces. I've mitered the corners of these and also cut a 6mm bevel to give a fall from back to front. This will help with rain runoff, but I have made many planters with flat, square tops, and they've lasted for years. So you do what you think is best for your planter. Above all, be safe and don't make any cuts that you don't feel comfortable with. Last of all, I'm fixing 4 rubber feet to the bottom at each corner, just to raise the planter up a little and keep the wood off the ground. If it's going to rot, it will start there. These only cost a few pence and are practically invisible once the planter is underground. I'm finishing my planter with 4 coats of Danish oil. This goes on very easily, but does give off a lot of fumes, so use it in a well ventilated area or outside. You could also paint your planter using some garden paint, which I've used on various things in our garden. It will need recoating every couple of years, but you can wash your brush out in water and it doesn't give off any nasty fumes either. Here's Ruby putting in her usual obligatory appearance. I've drilled some holes in the bottom of the trough for drainage, and I'm using a few broken pieces from the old terracotta planter to cover these before adding compost and a handful of plant food. I'm planting this up with some herbs before giving them a final watering in. And here it is, all finished. Definitely an improvement on the old one. That's the plants taken care of. What about attracting some birds to your garden? Click here to see how.